We're going to be looking at this special report from Byline Times they did last week about being inside GB News' misinformation factory. Let's go, guys. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is REGANELITE here with an article from Byline Times. Now, yes, this is quite an old one, but I do think it's worth bringing back and having a look, to be fair. Given that there's quite an interesting amount of information that Byline Times has to share. As always with Byline Times, them, like Open Democracy, if you can support them financially, please do so, because they do put in some really fantastic journalistic work for the benefit of the British people. So the headline they have is Inside GB News' Misinformation Factory. Max Colbert and Joshua Motto exploring the extremist and conspiratorial rhetoric fostered on the go-to channel for the hard right in an outlet Conservative MPs can still call home. So, GB News has been found to have breached impartiality rules by regulator Ofcom for the third time since its launch in 2021. The decision comes around an episode of Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil, the discussion programme hosted by Conservative MP's wife and husband duo, McVey and Philip Davies, in something resembling a broadcast from a post-coup state. The show featured pre-recorded interviews between the pair and their very own party's Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, talking about the government's economic policies ahead of the spring budget. The programme had received 45 complaints, and the investigation found that during these discussions no real attention was given anywhere in the programme to the viewpoints of politicians, political parties, organisations or individuals that either, for example, criticise, oppose or put forward policy alternatives to the viewpoint given by three Conservative politicians. Esther and Phil aren't the only Conservative politicians controversially hosting shows on the channel to have come under fire, with 3 or 4 of the most recent investigations concerning sitting MPs. Given multiple failures to adhere to the basic registry standards on GB News, the revolving door between the channel and the politician raises serious questions about the proportionate of public officials continuing to accept lucrative positions with the broadcaster. Conservative MPs have been paid nearly £350,000 for appearances on GB News since the start of 2023, Byline Times analysis shows. That's a huge amount of money for them to get Conservative MPs to sit on the site. Now, we haven't even scratched the surface of this article. They're already, we've talked quite a few times about GB News, about how they come across to their viewers and the people that they put in these places. And the thing is, the problem is, it's not biased. It's a one-sided story. And the thing is that in this country in particular, we know there are questions about. There have been questions about sometimes when it comes to Sky News and how they come across, or how BBC and they come across. Almost nobody comes across with Channel 4, because I do think that Channel 4 are very sitting down the middle, doing their job in terms of journalism. And they have held both Conservatives and Labour to the fire when it comes to them putting it. You don't see a lot of Conservatives being put to the fire when it comes to GB News. And the reason you don't is because they literally have MPs working for them. And it just feels propaganda rather than actual news, the way it comes across, this GB network comes across. But they still get a significant number of viewers because people feed into this. I can't say I'm not 100% sure if they don't get the same amount of level, in my opinion. I correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they get the same amount of audience as the likes of Sky and BBC, as far as I'm aware. But they do get an audience, and that audience gets fed into this narrative, and then that narrative is what people tend to believe. If you can control the media of a public, they will end up doing anything for you. That's how dangerous this is, and it's so important that there has to be laws in place to stop medias from basically going out too far out. They need to be balanced of left and right as well as centre. And GB News, in my opinion, from what I've watched, from what I've seen, doesn't do that. GB News also acts as an unofficial home for the small but vocal number of Conservatives on the further right of the party who have been increasingly playing to the anti-immigration and cultural war-orientated audience of parties like Reform and Reclaim. Senior members of these parties feature prominently on GB News' output. Yeah, the Reform Party and Reclaim, they appear all the time with it. How often do Labour MPs appear on GB News? Almost never. Have they ever had a Labour MP on there? They might have done. You can let me know in the comments of how many Labour MPs or anybody from Labour Party have actually been on GB News. Or Lib Dems, shall we say, or even Greens. The channel routinely broadcasts conspiratorial talking points, acting as an unofficial platform for fringe parties and projects on the right, coupled with the reputational harm on appearing on a broadcaster so frequently found to have fallen foul of regulations. How soon is it too soon to ask, when will Conservative politicians end their love affair with GB News? Watchdog warnings. While the 4 most recent Ofcom investigations cover serious potential breaches over a short period of time, they've only touched upon a fraction of GB News' output. There are currently 6 further active investigations into the channel, including 2 further episodes of Esther and Phil, 2 episodes of Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, and investigations into Reclaim leader Lawrence Fox show, guest presented by the party's former deputy leader Martin Dewby, in an episode of The Live Desk. It's too right-wing. Like, just that alone tells you it's too right-wing. 4 of these investigations include possible breaches of rules limiting politicians acting as presenters, and 3 covering potential breaches of impartiality. Since the channel was established in June 2021, a further 3 further investigations have concluded that GB News and one to the point GB News Radio has fallen short of expected standards. These, following from the broadcasts, have been found in breach of Ofcom regulations of a segment on the Mark Skune Show featuring anti-vaccine conspiracy theories Naomi Wolf. During the broadcast, Wolf repeatedly made unopposed claims that COVID-19 vaccine rolled out to the amounted to mass murder, as well as comparing to doctors in pre-Nazi Germany. If you put these kind of people on, that's what you're going to get, you know. This was the second time the channel was found by the regulator to have pushed misled COVID conspiracies, after another episode of Skune's show was found to have had presented a martially misleading interpretation of official data without sufficient challenge or counterweight, risking harm to viewers. Skune has since left the channel. And 3 GB News shows were recently collective hits with over 400 complaints in a single week at the end of August this year, hosted by Nigel Farage, Dan Wootton and Mark Donham. In a discussion on his show covering gang violence in the Kabaddi tournament in Derby, Farage said without evidence that the finger of blame labelled the people linked to the Kashgan separatist movement, which strives to create a homeland for Sikhs. You can't make claims without some kind of evidence. It's just pure outright attack. The Sikh Federation UK strongly criticised the segment, arguing that Farage's programme was inaccurate and biased, misrepresented by facts, was offensive, misleading, discriminatory, spread hate, and was unfair. A senior officer of the Sikh Press Association said that GB News piece may be the worst example of anti-Sikh reporting from a UK news org that I've seen in nearly 9 years of covering Sikhs in UK media. Nigel Farage was contacted for comment. What do you think? Do you think he answered it? Yeah, I didn't think so. Conspiracies and cock-ups. What a surprise. The same week as the Kabali controversy, Mark Donham's show was hit with 74 complaints when presenter Patrick Christie joked that with a guest that if you had one fake gun and one fake bullet and you could line up Harry or James Colden, I don't know which one you would go for. It's not something to laugh about. Like, that's not a joke. Why would you joke about like wanting to kill someone? I mean, I know they say fake gun and fake bullet, but it's still essentially you're joking about killing somebody. There's nothing funny about that. In January, GB News expressed concerns that it was going to try and cuss costs amid row with Ofcom, with Chairman Alan McCormack aiming to make the channel more disciplined. Since then, he's been hit with over 1,000 further complaints to Ofcom concerning 8 separate broadcasts. Byline Times analysis of Ofcom weekly complaints reviews reveals. The two most commonly complained about were Tonight with Dan Wootton and Neil Oliver Live. Oliver left his position at the Royal Society of Edinburgh with immediate effect on September the 6th, after it became apparent that his current views on various matters widely aired on television, putting him at odds with scientific and broader academic learning within the society, a spokesperson said. Oliver is frequently criticised for mainstreaming climate denialism and vaccine scepticism, both on GB News and on social media. 2 days after his departure from the RSE, he tweeted, "Anyone fancy a revolution? I could just go for a revolution right about now." Later added, "I meant what I said." Just no, mate. Just don't. Oliver and Christie aren't the only two GB News personalities to have engaged in discourse which appeared to incite violence. Another Ofcom complaint was filed by Extinction Rebellion media spokesperson Tom Hardy, concerning an interview Dan Wootton gave on his show to Shireen Speed, the driver who ran into Insulate Britain protests in her Range Rover. Why would you put that person, like, you can disagree with someone, but you outright ran them over? I remember that story vividly. During the interview, Wootton asked Speed, "How tempted were you, Sharon, to go a little bit harder into those women?" Why would you even ask that question? As previously reported by Byline Times, Hartley's complaint was ignored by Ofcom, representing part of an alleged ongoing failure of the regulator to take action on climate denialism platformed by GB News. Government's plans to achieve net zero have been labelled variously a suicide note, an apparatchik straitjacket, and wrong-headed by GB News guests and presenters who have openly advocated the benefits of fossil fuels in the industrial civilization while heavily promoting fracking. They are so out of touch with ordinary people. This news organisation, they're so out of touch with ordinary people. It's extraordinary. A joint investigation by the Smog and The Guardian May found that 1 in 3 GB News hosts have spread climate denial on air in 2022, while a majority attacked meaningful action on climate change. And finally, freedom of speech. As reported by Byline Times, GB News host and former Lads Mad Loader editor Martin Dewey is among those on the GB News roster pushing attacks on net zero, as well as adopting the language of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. And he has broadcast unverified and ultimately false anti-asylum seeker stories sourced from far-right telecom chats on air. Research from Hope Not Hate reveals that the frequent anti-migrant coverage conducted by GB News has led to the platform's far-right supporters more than once. In one interview in July, they spotlighted Dan Morgan, co-leader of the far-right Voice of Wales outlet. During another broadcast from Sitbicon, the same month hosted local resident Janet Steele, a conspiracy theorist and supporter of Britain First. Presenters of the show have, on several occasions, made other notes of far-right tropes, most commonly found on Telegram and 4chan, including the racist Great Replacement theory, that mass migration is replacing British culture, and anti-Semitic conspiracies surrounding the World Economic Forum, George Soros, and a globalistic elite controlling media narrative. Dan Wootton used the show after Byline Times' investigation into him was publicly condemned to pose a smear campaign by dark forces. Yeah, we covered Dan Wootton on the channel, guys. A segment from Mark Dolan's show in 2022 has had him asking, "Is the Prince in fact a puppet of the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization, as I like to call it? I hope not, but he's ticking all the right boxes." Host Beverly Turner was recently criticised by the Community Security Trust, the CST, which campaigns against anti-Semitic threats, for tweeting that the coronavirus appeared to be bioengineered to be less harmful than certain Jewish people, adding, "This is looking increasingly like a bioweapon to destroy the West." Why is this not on the front pages of every paper? That caused even some conservatives to break rank and call out the offensive language. Mind-boggling, insane, this stuff, isn't it? How much of this have you actually seen or heard as well? It's absolutely crazy. I mean, even getting conservatives to say that's too far tells you a lot. Tory MP Nicola Richards, chair of the all-party parliamentary group on anti-Semitism, said at the time, "The answer to those questions Bev poses in a tweet that is no self-respecting publisher or broadcaster will share this anti-Semitism conspiratorial fantasy, and neither should she." Tuna has come under fire again this week for defending Russell Brand against reporting into the history of alleged sexual assault, emotional abuse and rape, which she did without watching the Channel 4 Dispatches investigation, by her own admission on air. Like, if you haven't even watched the Dispatches investigation, she doubled down on her original tweet, which expressed that Brand was a hero being attacked and that he'd be welcomed on my GB News show anytime. While defenders like to point out GB News claims that it puts free speech first, in practice this often amounts to the right kind of free speech. And on more than one occasion, commentators have felt they can no longer support the channel because of its bias. Yeah, that's the thing as well. Like, they claim to be free speech, but it's only their version of free speech as opposed to any free speech. There's a difference. There's a difference there. Departure Lounge. Presenter India Whitterby refused to appear on the programme again in 2021 after previously agreeing to do a weekly appearance on Tonight with Dan Wootton. On departure, Wootley accused GB News of demonetising trans people at every opportunity. Former presenter Giuto Hardy left in 2021 after being suspended for taking the knee after an expression of his rejection of racism. GB News said he'd broken editorial standards by doing so, but didn't apply the same logic to Nigel Farage, who followed Harris, telling viewers that he will not be taking the knee for anyone. One rule for them, and one rule for another. We've heard that thread before, guys. The channel has even proved too much for Andrew Neil, who quit after just a few months of his launch. Yeah, he realised how bad it was and got out. Writing in the Sunday Times, Harriet described the channel as becoming an absurd parody of what it proclaimed to be, adding that taking the knee is now simply a bold statement that you reject racism. And if you have an issue for a channel or government, it's a big problem for all of us. After the departure of Mark Skieran following his penalties for breaking Ofcom rules earlier this year, the channel said that GB News takes Ofcom compliance extremely seriously. Do you honestly think, after what we've just read, that they take them very seriously? Let me know down in the comments below. All other presenters are expected to comply fully with the broadcaster code, and there are no exemptions through moving forward. It appears GB News is already considering plans to undermine regulatory oversight. It was announced last week that it was planning to move some of its more controversial presenters to online streaming away from the traditional broadcast TV, bypassing Ofcom enforcement. Meanwhile, Reform UK leader Richard Tice is moving over from Talk TV to GB News, the latest hard-right parasitism added to the team. Gail Bradford, co-founder of the Extinction Rebellion, told Byline Times, "Our media is largely a pathological divide and rule alongside inflammatory distractions. GB News is at the leading edge of this depravity. Where is their responsibility to our children, our nature, our country that can pull together in adversity? None of that. And anything for a fast buck. We desperately need responsible journalism." GB News and several of its partners were contacted for comment. What do you think, guys? Do you think they responded to this? This was a couple of days ago. I'm going to go a tiny bit out on a limb, guys, and say no. I'm just going to point this out there. You know, I've seen enough. I don't watch GB News. I have seen clips. I have seen video footage. And they are poisoning the minds of their viewers, in my opinion. You can disagree with that, and you can say that they are being free speech if you want to. That's your opinion, and you are entitled to your opinion. But in my opinion, I think they are dangerous. I think they are bad for this country. I think they are hurting people, and I even think they're unintentionally may lead to their actions, their comments can lead to people doing very stupid things that could lead to more people potentially dying, for example, when it comes to immigration and asylum seeking. I'm not saying they're outright responsible for deaths of people. I'm not claiming that, but they can inadvertently be responsible for it by some of their rhetoric and comments that they make on their channel. And that is a dangerous thing. They even need to do one thing. Ofcom needs to get a grip, really, to be fair. I'm saying they need to do something. Well, it is a case that Ofcom need to get a grip on it, and we hope that if Labour get into power at the next election, I will say if, because nothing is certain, we'd like to think that they would change, that they would give Ofcom a bit more powers to ensure that they clamp down on any dangerous rhetoric from media outlets such as GB News. At least I'd like to think so, guys. But after all that, what do you think of inside GB News' misinformation factory? What are you guys' thoughts on what we've just read? Let me know down in the comment section below. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it. Like, share and subscribe as always. Thank you very much if you've watched all the way through, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.